Venezuela and the Curse of Oil. How Venezuela became the most surreal collapse in Latin America. Hey everyone. Today, I want to talk about a country that once stood tall on a mountain of oil wealth, a country whose per capita income once doubled that of China's, but has now plunged into an abyss so deep it reads more like dystopian fiction than real-life economics. From 2014 to 2021, Venezuela's economy contracted for 7 straight years. Its GDP shrank by more than 2/3. Inflation skyrocketed to a point where, in 2018, it reached a jaw-dropping 1,300,000%. The local currency lost over 99% of its value. Foreign reserves dropped from $20 billion to under $1 billion. Meanwhile, the country's external debt ballooned past $1.5 trillion. And the human cost? Devastating. In 2018, the minimum monthly wage was 325,000 bolivars. That wouldn't even buy a cup of coffee, 250,000 bolivars, let alone a bottle of cooking oil, 1.8 million, or a bag of flour, 3 million plus. Working full-time couldn't guarantee a meal. Over 70% of Venezuela's 28 million people were living in extreme poverty. At least 7 million fled the country, about 2/5 of the population. For context, that's the kind of displacement you'd expect in full-blown war zones like Ukraine. But Venezuela was never at war. It had something else: oil, and a devastating resource curse. Venezuela's love affair with oil dates back to the early 20th century. In the 1920s, Royal Dutch Shell discovered oil in the Maracaibo Basin. By 1929, Venezuela was the world's second-largest oil producer, just behind the U.S. By the time President Gomez died in 1935, oil accounted for over 90% of Venezuela's export earnings. But the country didn't profit much. The government acted more like a night watchman than a shareholder. Western oil giants, Shell, Gulf, and Standard Oil, controlled nearly 98% of production. That changed in 1943 with a new oil law that gave Venezuela a 50-50 profit split. In 1960, it became one of the 5 founding members of OPEC. The country finally began reclaiming control over its oil industry and cashing in big. Then came the oil shock of 1973. As war erupted in the Middle East, OPEC imposed an embargo on the West. Oil prices quadrupled overnight. Venezuela gained an extra $10 billion in revenue that year alone and became the richest country in Latin America on a per capita basis. But oil riches didn't lift all boats. Instead of diversifying its economy, Venezuela grew more dependent on crude exports. Corruption spread like wildfire. From 1972 to 1997, over $100 billion vanished due to embezzlement and graft. Then came the crash. In the 1980s, global oil prices plummeted from $40 to $10 a barrel. Venezuela, utterly dependent on oil, spiraled into crisis. Government revenue fell by 2/3, GDP shrank by 20%, inflation surged past 80%, and foreign reserves collapsed from $25 billion to just $7 billion. The country entered nearly 2 decades of political and economic turmoil. Then, Hugo Chavez arrived. A former paratrooper turned populist leader, Chavez swept into office with a promise to launch a Bolivarian revolution, an anti-capitalist movement aimed at building a Latin-style socialist utopia. For the next 14 years, Chavez ruled with charisma and oil money. His timing was perfect. From 2000 to 2014, global oil prices surged, boosted by wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Venezuela, sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, saw its economy soar. Annual growth averaged 5.1%, the fastest in Latin America. Government revenue exploded from $22.9 billion to $581.8 billion. Per capita GDP rose from $3,417 to over $18,100. But it was all built on oil, nothing else. Instead of investing in education, infrastructure, or manufacturing, Chavez doubled down on nationalization. First the energy sector, then telecommunications, banking, manufacturing. Everything foreign-owned was taken back. Some companies were literally escorted out of the country by military vehicles. Compensation, when offered, never exceeded half of market value. The result? Between 2007 and 2017, foreign direct investment, FDI, plunged from $9.2 billion to less than $3 billion, a 70% drop. The biggest foreign investor went from being the US to China. And though state-owned assets rose from 10% to 40% of GDP, the private sector was gutted. Meanwhile, Chavez pushed social welfare to unsustainable levels. Free housing, free healthcare, free education, cash handouts, populism on steroids. When Chavez died in 2013, his successor, Nicolas Maduro, inherited both the oil wealth and the ticking time bomb beneath it. In 2014, global oil prices collapsed again. Venezuela had no fallback plan. GDP growth stalled at 0.4%. Inflation jumped to 68.5%. Imports and exports fell by 8%. Government revenue dropped 25%. Reserves lost another 20%. Supermarkets ran out of basics. The welfare state could no longer deliver. Protests broke out. Anti-American slogans turned into anti-government marches. And Maduro? He responded with chaos economics. First, he printed money, lots of it. Inflation soared from 180% in 2015 to 274% in 2016, then to 2,460% in 2016-2017. By 2018, inflation reached 1.3 million%. Yes, million, with 6 zeros. In response, Maduro raised the minimum wage from 325,000 bolivars to 18 million, a 60 times increase. He raised taxes, especially on oil companies, from 30% to 60%. But prices still rose faster than wages. Business owners collapsed under pressure. Shops closed. Factories shut down. Unemployment followed. 2018, 22.5%. 2019, 36.1%. 2022, 40.6%. 2021, 37.3%, marginal recovery. With the economy flatlining, Maduro launched a series of economic experiments. 1. Price controls on food staples, rice, flour, cooking oil, backfired, leading to hoarding and black markets. 2. A new cryptocurrency, petro, pegged to oil prices, was introduced in 2018 and quietly abandoned by 2019. 3. Currency redenomination, 5 zeros were removed from the bolivar. Then again, and again. By 2021, $1 was worth 5.5 billion new bolivars. The currency became a joke. People carried stacks of cash but couldn't buy bread. Petro flopped. New banknotes failed to restore faith. Investment vanished, social cohesion broke, and with it, any hope of a quick recovery. Ironically, the one thing that gave Venezuela a breather came not from Caracas, but from Kyiv. When war broke out in Ukraine, energy prices spiked worldwide. Oil revenues helped Maduro's government catch its breath. But it was too little, too late. The damage was already done. The economic engine was gone. The trust evaporated. Reading 100 Years of Solitude, I once wondered why Gabriel Garcia Marquez filled Latin America with such surreal magic. Endless rain, flying carpets, people growing younger. Now I get it. In places like Venezuela, reality itself feels stranger than fiction. So what do you think? Can a country once so rich really recover after total collapse? Or is Venezuela doomed to repeat this cycle again and again?